It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Thank you for joining us, folks. I'm Sam Lesante. I want to thank you for joining us in a special edition. I would also want to thank our media partner here, the Standard Speaker, for being here today. Also, a special welcome to WNEP Television, the Pottsville Republican, and WPPA Radio. Folks, there is no question that the senatorial election in the 29th District is probably one of the most heated in the state of Pennsylvania. Today, I hope to bring you some facts that we should all know about the candidates. I'm very happy to say that both of the candidates are here, incumbent State Senator Dave Argle and contender Brian Rich. The format of the show will be an opening statement by each of them with rebuttals and then a closing summaries. Folks, I've been advocating for years, before you vote for anyone, please look at the qualifications of the person who is going to represent you and possibly determine your future. Today, I hope you will get a closer look at both of the candidates. First, we'll have an opening statement by State Senator Dave Argle. Dave?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having us. For the last 3 years, it's been my privilege to represent over 250,000 people in the 29th Senate District, which is all of Schuylkill County, portions of Carbon, Monroe, Lehigh, Berks, and Northampton counties. And on the job, every day, we work with the big issues and the small issues. This week in Harrisburg, the House began to move some long needed legislation to save millions of dollars by controlling the size of the House of Representatives and the Senate and moving to a smaller legislature for the first time since the 1870s. I've been working on bills to try to eliminate the much hated school district property tax. I've said it many times at town meetings throughout the 6 counties that I represent that maybe that tax made sense in the 1830s, but there has to be a better way, a more fair way to fund the public schools than how big is your house? What year was it built? What kind of windows do you have? I mean, to me, that's just a crazy way to fund the public schools. But we also deal with the small issues. In the office in Tamaqua that I share with Representative Knowles, the office in Pottsville, the office in Hamburg, the office up in the Poconos. Every day, people come to see us with problems. Maybe it's something simple like, how do you fill out a civil service form? Maybe it's something simple like, oh, maybe I lost my driver's license in the mail. But it also might be a mayor, a township supervisor, a city councilman who's looking for thousands of dollars in grant money to upgrade a sewage system. That's why I get up every morning to go to work. I find the job very challenging, whether it's the big issues or the small issues. It's work that I very much enjoy. I think we've done a good job for the people of the district, and I'm looking forward to asking them to renew my contract on April 24th.
Thank you, Senator. Now we'll have a 2-minute opening statement by Mr. Brian Rich. Brian?
Well, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Dave. I've decided to run. I'm Brian Rich. I'm a father, a businessman, a husband. I've decided to run because I don't believe that our children are going to have the same opportunities that we enjoyed growing up. You know, when I was a youngster, one of the most compelling things for me was the space program. Kennedy said we're going to land on a man on the moon before the end of the decade. But today, it takes us 10 years to get a bridge over a stream. It's a regulatory burden that businessmen can't deal with today. And it sits at the feet of the current legislator and the current legislators in Harrisburg. Overregulation has stifled Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is 46th in job growth in the United States, dead last in business climate. Our district has a chronic unemployment problem. We need to create jobs. Jobs are the most compelling thing that we need to do to pull Pennsylvania out of its current economic woes. So, despite the fact that Dave is effective in dealing with people's driver's licenses and those kind of nuances, we need to create jobs so that our kids can enjoy the same type of opportunities that we've enjoyed. Thanks.
Thank you. Now for some of the questions. Based on a letter to the editor by Reverend Biesel, Reverend Biesel wrote that as of 2009, we have 11.8% of people living below the poverty line. He goes on to say that both of your campaigns, referring to Senator Argle and Mr. Rich, are spending a lot of money slandering each other. He says, stop it. The people in Schuylkill County deserve better. With that being said, as I mentioned before, let's deal with the true facts about what is being said. Senator, in your ads, you mentioned that Brian Rich took $5 million in stimulus funds that paid for windmills in West Monomoy Township. You also state that Brian Rich was sued in a wrongful death suit. Can you elaborate on these statements?
I certainly can. We, in looking at the record, learned that this gentleman, who's my opponent, has spent a lot of time in the courts. Apparently he's won some cases, he's lost some cases. We understand that some of them are still sealed up and no one is allowed to see the results of those. The court case that I found the most interesting in looking at the urgent need for jobs in this area was just last year when a Schuylkill County Schuylkill County jury unanimously ruled against him, a $2 million verdict for breaking his word, breaking his contract, and in the process destroying another company. We also understand that while he's had certainly complaints about my record, this same gentleman has applied for government grant after government grant after government grant, hired lobbyists to seek those grants, and then issued press releases saying, we got them. Now we understand that perhaps he never finally got the money because they weren't able to complete the deal. But we know he asked for it, we know he sought them again and again and again, and so I find it rather hypocritical that the same person who would attack me for trying to help businesses with loans and grants would seek them himself.
Thank you. Brian, you have a minute to respond to that.
Well, Sam, you asked him about a wrongful death, and he didn't answer that question because he knows that his flyer was false and that allegation was false. That allegation that our senator alleged was a thief came onto our mining property to steal copper wire and was tragically electrocuted. We were subsequently sued by a trial lawyer, and Dave tries to use that as a point of interest for the voter. As it relates to the stimulus package and the wind project, Dave knows fully well that project never was pursued because the stimulus money had too many strings attached. It'd be foolish as a businessman not to look at what government programs are available to me because my competition's doing that. This stimulus money was never taken. Dave knows that, despite the fact that he said in his flyer, and he said it to the voters, that I took that money. He knows fully well that that's not the case. And that's the essence of Dave's exaggerations, to try to exaggerate the record.
Thank you. Dave?
The piece said that you had received commitments for millions of dollars. You did receive commitments for millions of dollars. Because the project ultimately failed at the end, I can understand why after 10 years some of those commitments expire. But the key word in the piece, I believe, was that you had received commitments after you had applied for the dollars. There's no doubt in my mind that those commitments were secure.
Well, okay. Sam, we have to set the record straight here. This is Republican Senator, state candidate Rich took $5 million in taxpayer stimulus money. The words "took" is right here. He knows that I didn't take anything, that we applied for it, that we considered it. It's only prudent as a businessman to see what programs are out there. That money never transacted, and that's a perfect example of Dave's political speak. He says commitments, but in fact his flyer says took.
Okay, well, we stayed in within the 1 minute thing. David didn't finish his whole minute, but Brian, staying in the same thing of money. According to an article in a newspaper, it read, Rich and his family and business colleagues have been more than willing to contribute to political campaigns to get credits. They contributed more than $17,000 last year alone to political candidates. Could you comment on this?
Well, it's not uncommon for my business, myself, and my family to contribute to candidates. We've contributed to Dave in the past. When I realized his record, how liberal it really was, we're where we are today. So no, it's part of the process. Doing business when we're in business and we have a successful business, we're always solicited by politicians for to fund their campaigns and to fund their efforts. So it's not unusual that we're solicited.
To continue on with the stimulus, because you have about a minute and a half left, do you want to respond any more on that particular stimulus?
Was your question that we paid
No, you contributed
contributed in
into
exchange for stimulus, or
No,
what was
you contributed $17,000 to political candidates.
No, it's certainly true.
Okay, all right. Dave, you have a minute to respond to that.
It's not uncommon, he said, to contribute to candidates. What is very uncommon, however, is for someone who keeps telling us, as my opponent does, what a good conservative Republican he is, to give to liberal Democrats. Conservative Republicans don't normally give hundreds and thousands of dollars to guys like Ed Rendell. No one ever accused him of being a conservative Republican. Or Senator Fumo down in Philadelphia before he went to jail also received thousands of dollars from my opponent. Or the mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Street, again, no one ever accused him of being a conservative Republican. And so I don't understand this disconnect, how someone can pretend to be a conservative Republican and yet have such a history over the years of supporting Democrat after Democrat after Democrat. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Brian, you have a minute to respond.
Well, the exaggerations of hundreds of thousands. Dave just said hundred thousands. I think Sam, you just said it was 17,000 last year alone. But we were doing business in Philadelphia. My company does business in Philadelphia. The politicians in Philadelphia asked us to contribute to the campaigns. So that's not unusual. What is unusual is for a candidate that purports to be a Republican to have voted for 85% of Rendell's budgets. Dave voted for $400 million hike in our gas tax. That's certainly not a Republican or conservative position. Dave voted against the Acre Bill, which was a bill to limit liability for farmers, and Dave was one of only 8 Republicans to vote against our farmers. So that's certainly not a Republican position. So I think that that record is clear, and Dave's record of voting for Rendell's budgets is a matter of record, and I think that speaks for itself.
Dave.
I never would have had to make compromises with Governor Ed Rendell if people like Brian wouldn't have helped him to get elected in the first place. I also believe I said hundreds and thousands of dollars. If I said hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'll apologize, but I believe I said hundreds and thousands.
Let's move on to the next question. Dave, you said as a leader, you are a leader in the efforts to eliminate the unfair school district property tax system. Can you tell us what Senate Bill 1400 does for the property tax?
Yes, and this is, I think, another example where Brian opposes it, I support it, and so you'll find today there's some things we agree on, there's some things we disagree on. This is obviously one of the things we disagree on. I believe it's time to eliminate the property tax for school districts for all time. A lot of different governors have tried to tweak it. We've tried to amend it. None of those things have worked. That's why I'd like to drive a stake through the heart of the beast so it never, ever comes back again. What this bill would do in the form of a constitutional amendment, it would give the final say to the voters of Pennsylvania to make sure that once the school district property tax is killed off, it can never, ever come back. It would require a mixture of sales and income taxes. When you're talking about $10, $12, $13 billion in school district property taxes, you can't just replace that with a tax on bubble gum. And so we need to make sure that we have a dollar for dollar replacement of the existing fund. The other important thing is legislation that's already passed to control the spending by the school districts, because any number of people have pointed out to me that if we don't control the spending, we haven't solved the problem, whether it's sales tax, property tax, income tax, whatever. That's why in the last couple of years we have changed the law now to say to a school district that the only way that you can increase your taxes is if you ask the voters for permission if you want to go past the rate of inflation. So if we change where the money comes from and we control the rate of spending, I believe then we will have done the taxpayers a considerable service. It's one that I've been asked for again and again and again to do in all 6 counties, and quite honestly, I was rather surprised when Brian came out opposed to this bill.
Brian, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, the Reading Eagle just came out and said that the bill was, the numbers didn't add up. And the issue is not that I don't want property tax, it's that we've been promised property tax by Dave, and I think this is Dave's 14th election. We've heard about it for 14 elections. Nothing's happened. I believe that the Reading Eagle has it right, that the numbers, when they add it up, they don't add up. And what we need to do is first stop our spending. And the spending crisis in Pennsylvania rests at the feet of Dave and Dave's colleagues. We have a pension crisis in Pennsylvania that's causing our property taxes to soar. It's a direct relation. The pension crisis in Pennsylvania is the root of the problem. If we could eliminate our pension problem, had Dave not voted for that in 2001, we wouldn't be in the position right now that we're in, and we would be able to handle the property taxes. We'd be able to reform it, but we need to fix the pension system first, and then we can fix the property taxes and drive a stake in it, like Dave says. But it first has to occur with the stop in the spending. So,
Dave, you got a minute to respond.
Yeah, this isn't just my bill. This is a bill that we've been working on for some time with Representative Cox and many other groups. I think 60 or 70 statewide taxpayer groups have come out in favor of this legislation. They've also come out in favor of my reelection. And so I think that it's very important to note that this isn't just something that I cooked up at the last minute on my own. I also find it interesting that he's complaining and completely exaggerating my pension. Do you notice what he said? The bill passed in 2001. It took him until 2012 to complain about my vote. I think that should tell you something right there.
Okay. Come back, you'll have a chance to respond to that. Folks, you're watching the Sam Lesante Show, and once again, I want to thank our media partner, Standard Speaker, for being here, and also the Posse Republican, WNEP Television, and WPPA. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. I want to thank all of you on Service Electric Cablevision, now covering almost northern and central Schuylkill County. Up to 42,000 households, and our good friends at Comcast in the Pottsville area, another 25,000. So we're very happy to have you on board. I'm Sam Lesante, as I said, and my guest today, we have Senator Dave Argle and contender for this Senate race in the 29th Senatorial District, Brian Rich. Brian, this is for you. You have made the state pension a big theme of your campaign. You even are pledging to decline the legislature's pension. Why is this issue so important to you, and what does it mean for the taxpayer? You got 2 minutes.
Well, Sam, Dave says I haven't complained about it. In fact, I have, and I've finally been compelled to do something about it. The pension system that Pennsylvania has is the same one that bankrupted Bethlehem Steel and many other great companies. Bethlehem Steel, one of the greatest companies in American history, built the Golden Gate Bridge, the Empire State Building, and beat the Germans and the Japanese during World War II. Fell over the weight of the defined pension system. Dave passed this law in 2001 that gave state workers a 25% increase in their state pension and gave himself a 50% increase in his pension. It took a while for that to manifest itself in terms of being problematic. But anyone that took business class, Business 101, knew that the defined pension system was an unsustainable pension promise. Anytime something's too good to be true, it probably is. And in this case, we're just finding out how problematic it is. Pennsylvania right now, this year, has a $1.2 billion pension deficit. It's projected to be $4 billion in 3 years. But this unfunded liability is the root cause of all of our problems. Why all of our school districts are underfunded, why there's a fiscal strain at every police station and every firehouse. It is an unsustainable problem, and it needs to be fixed. That's what I pledge to do by not taking a defined pension plan and by promoting a 401k style plan for all the legislators as well as new hires in state government. But Dave, before we went to break, said that I exaggerate his pension. I don't know. I've said it's between $110 or $100 and $110,000 a year in retirement benefits. I think that's for a legislator to become a legislative millionaire on our backs is unacceptable. And that doesn't include his lifetime medical benefits that we don't enjoy as taxpayers unless we plan very well.
Dave, you have 1 minute to respond.
The bill that passed in 2001 passed by an overwhelming vote. I think it was about 170 to 30. Most of the experts who talked to us at that time said that the system could afford to do it, and that in so doing, we would be helping hundreds of thousands of retirees, many of whom were living on very, very limited income. Turned out to be a bad vote, only because of the recession that hit when crazy people crashed airplanes into the World Trade Center in 2001, and then in 2008, the stock market crashed again. 80% of the current problem can be tied to stock market losses, not any act of the General Assembly or the governor. He's right on one point, however. We do need to make it much more like the private sector system. There are bills that are moving. He's also wrong on one other thing. He's saying he would not take a pension under reforms passed by the General Assembly, since he tells us he wouldn't stay in the House and Senate very long. He wouldn't be eligible for a pension in the first place because of changes we've already enacted.
Brian, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what the nuances he's talking about there, but the reality of it is anyone that took a business class knew that the defined pension system is a broken system. We reformed it in our company in 1983, and that's why we're a success today. The one really peculiar thing that we have to ask Dave is if it was 25% was good enough for the retirees and our state employees and our state teachers, why did the legislators vote themselves a 50% increase? It seems to me to be a political sleight of hand that has been only recently brought to light, and it's brought to light by me and is one of the primary reasons why I've been so viciously attacked. But it's something that we need to fix because Pennsylvania is dead last in business growth, 46th in dead last in business climate, 46th in job growth. We have to fix this system if we're going to fix Pennsylvania, and that's what I want to do.
Dave, the other night at the debate, you said that legislating is not easy. Could you tell us what you meant by that?
Sure. The district that I represent is larger than the state of Rhode Island, but they're not, all the districts aren't like this one. Philadelphians tend to look at issues perhaps a little differently than people in Pottsville or Pine Grove. And then you have, 203 members of the House, which, as I said, I think is way too many, and I'm glad that we're finally going to be reducing that. That's a legislation that I have sponsored myself in the past. And so in order to pass a bill, you need 102 votes in the House, you need 26 votes in the Senate, and you need the governor. And I have proven that I can do that again and again and again. After Senator Rhodes died, I made a commitment to his family that I would take his blight legislation, work with all the different affected groups, work with all the local governments, and give local governments more tools in fighting blight in places like Shenandoah and Monterey City and Tamaqua and Frackville. It took us 2 years to assemble that coalition, but we finally did it. I've done it on other bills as well. I've done it by working with the local people to create new jobs in places like the hometown industrial park at Tidewood. That used to be a vacant industrial park. Today there's all over 500 jobs there. But I don't do that by myself. A legislature doesn't get elected as some kind of Superman. You've got to work with people every day, Republicans, Democrats, people that perhaps you don't have a lot of common with, but in order to move the agenda ahead, both in Harrisburg in passing laws and here in the district to make the changes that the people that I represent deserve. It takes a lot of work. This isn't a hobby. This is a full-time effort, work that, as I said, I find very challenging. And I think when he belittles some of my efforts, I don't think just Brian trying to be vicious. I think it's simply because he doesn't understand the process as it exists today.
Brian?
Well, for everyone out there that's ever done anything worthwhile, it's never easy. Nothing's easy. I mean, for Dave to say that it's not easy is an excuse. What you need is leadership. What we need is leadership. And I started today by saying that Kennedy had said we're going to land a man on the moon in the next decade. And he did it. The country did it. They banded together, and he showed leadership, and his cabinet showed leadership, and they were able to get that done. But Pennsylvania, we can't even put a bridge over a stream. It rests at the feet of the legislators because they're too interested in keeping their own jobs, because they aren't prepared to do the bold things. It's when you have a legislative pension and you're interested in keeping that job, you're never willing to stick your neck out. I am willing to stick my neck out. I'm prepared to make the necessary changes in Harrisburg because I don't have a vested interest in staying there.
Dave, you have a minute to respond to that?
Every vote I cast is a matter of public record. And on some issues, no matter what I do, I'm going to get a group of people mad at me. I find it interesting that suddenly this pension issue is so important to my opponent when, as he had noted himself, he supported me in several elections. Other members of his family supported me in other elections. I don't think this election has anything to do with my vote in 2001. I think that's simply a cop-out.
Folks, you're watching the Sam Lesante Show, and as you can see, we have, as I said, it's a heated debate, one of the most heated campaigns, I think, in the state of Pennsylvania, the 29th Senatorial District. We're going to take a break and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks, and once again, I welcome all you viewers in Comcast Cable and Service Electric Cablevision. Appreciate you tuning us in. Today, my guests are Senator Dave Argle and Mr. Brian Rich. This is a highly contested campaign in the 29th Senatorial District. Very happy to have both of them here on the show. Brian, this is for you. Why do you support term limits? And do you have a plan set to show the people in the state of Pennsylvania how to reduce our property taxes? Now, we've been hearing that for years, and I really have not seen, or I think our viewers have not really seen any serious decline in property taxes.
I thought I'd get a minute to respond to Dave's last comments.
Well, you would like to? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Dave had suggested that there was a cop-out of some sort. I'm not sure what, but I'm a businessman. We have nearly 600 employees, 620 employees. I don't believe that Dave has a monopoly on the seat. And I'm disappointed with the direction that our state has taken. I'm disappointed with the direction our district's taken. An example of that, and the real problem, is that we don't have any job growth, and we have a dismal economy. I have great employees, and one example, I'll leave her name out of the example, but she's done everything right. 401k plan, wants to retire, but her home value is flat or declining. And she did everything right. Nest egg in her home. There's simply no one coming to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the second oldest state in the union, and it's not because we have beaches. It's because people are leaving Pennsylvania. We are not creating any jobs. Our future, it's not our children's future that's being taken, it's our future that's being taken by this overregulation. So I've gotten involved to help our employees and to help our district and to help this state.
I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you. But Brian, let's get back to the question I just asked you. Why do you support term limits? And do you have a plan to show the people in the state of Pennsylvania how to reduce our property taxes? Because as I said, we've been really hearing that for years, and I personally don't see any real serious decline in property taxes.
Well, for Sam, for every term Dave's been in office, they've talked about it. It continues to be a non-starter. Despite what he said, the Eagle reaffirms that again. But term limits, number one, you need fresh blood in there so that you have bold ideas. If we're successful in reforming the pension system, I think that term limits almost becomes automatic, because then our legislators aren't interested in staying there and becoming vested in the plan, which Dave referred to earlier. So I mean, he's right. I wouldn't get the pension regardless, because I'm not going to be there. I don't want to stay there, and I don't think that citizen legislators should get a pension. I think if the founding fathers had considered that legislators would vote themselves pensions, they would have enacted term limits from the get-go. But the founding fathers didn't anticipate term limits. It was only when legislators could find an opportunity to vote themselves pay raises and their own perks and benefits that we've gotten into this discussion where term limits is more important. But I think fresh blood's essential for good government nonetheless. So as it relates to property tax, Sam, the system's been talked about, and my proposal, I think, is pretty bold, and that is to 401k system for all the legislators and all new hires. Then we can freeze our property taxes. Only the folks that have children in school would continue to pay. Would make up the difference in a sales tax, and the sales tax would only be applicable to goods, but it would exclude food and clothing. So, and the neat component of that as well is it creates an element of competition that if your son or daughter isn't in the public school system, that you could take that savings and apply it to a private school. So there's almost a voucher component to my plan. It's workable, but it's only workable if we stop the bleeding of the pension system. So that's first and foremost, because we have to stop that hole in our boat.
Dave, you have a minute to respond.
Thank you. Brian is on the wrong side of this issue regarding property tax elimination. I have voted for it 6, 7, 8 times. It didn't fail because I didn't try hard enough. It failed because we couldn't get representatives and senators from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh to vote with us. But we haven't given up. We've gone back again and again and again to meet with them in an effort to turn no votes into yes votes. And I think that we have made some significant progress. That's why we have 60 or 70 statewide local taxpayer groups in support of this. I also think he missed the important thing from the Reading Eagle. When the Reading Eagle asked its own readers if they liked this idea, they overwhelmingly support this idea. I've heard it in Berks County, I've heard it in Schuylkill County. I think it's time to eliminate the property tax for all time, and I'm just sitting here shaking my head at the fact that he refuses to support the bill.
Brian?
Well, it's not that I refuse to support the bill. The bill has, like you said, you haven't been able to pass it 8 times. You haven't been able to get the job done in that respect. And the reason he hasn't been able to get the job done is because we have a hole in the boat, and that's the pension system. And they don't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to talk about it. We have to fix that hole in the boat before you can fix the pension system. Before you can fix the property system, because there's such a shortage of revenue. That's the issue. The other issue is leadership. If we need to shut down government, if we need to stand on our head to get this through, we need to get it through. We need to do what it takes to get this done. Not simply say, well, we're not going to get it done this time and we'll build a consensus later. We have to show leadership, and that leadership starts with the legislators declining their pension. All those legislators in Harrisburg and in Philadelphia that Dave's referring to, they've got that legislative pension that they're enjoying as well. That's why it's not getting done, because they're all interested in keeping their legislative lottery.
Dave, how do you propose to create jobs in Pennsylvania? As we heard, and you stated, I think before, at another place, Pennsylvania today is one of the states that is almost dead last in job creation.
What we need to do is control the spending, because if we can indeed control the government spending, then we can begin to reduce the the corporate net income tax, the capital stock and franchise tax, all of the other business taxes. I just had the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection in to meet with people from the Schuylkill County Chamber to hear from them what kind of regulations can be reduced. I have worked, as I said earlier, with a group of volunteers, with local elected officials, with school board members, with township supervisors on things like the KOZs. It was a very, very controversial idea. People weren't so sure they were willing to waive taxes on some of these old abandoned properties for 5, 10, 15 years. But guess what? They took a chance, they did it, and we created more new jobs through the private sector. People like Can Do, people like Sedco, people like Tide. We created more new jobs just because of the tax reductions in the KOZ program than I think any other spot in Pennsylvania. And so there isn't one easy answer to job creation. But the solution is lower taxes, lower spending, lower regulation. By doing that, we have proven in this state and in this very region that it can be done. I'm going to tell you it's going to be a lot easier to do under this governor than it was under the last governor, because this governor is much, much easier to work with when it comes to reducing regulation or reducing spending. That wasn't something that Ed Rendell wanted to hear.
Brian, you comment?
Well, Pennsylvania, despite the story of KOZs, et cetera, Pennsylvania is 46th in job growth, dead last in business climate. And it rests at our regulatory environment. Like I said earlier, I mean, we landed a man on the moon in 10 years, and today you can't build a bridge in 10 years. It's a regulatory, we need to drive common sense into our system. But it all turns on, again, fiscal reform. For Pennsylvania to be open for business, we have to show that we have the fiscal discipline to rein in our budget. And that starts with leadership, and that starts with 401ks for all legislators. We still haven't heard Dave say it, except that as a alternative. A right-to-work state. Pennsylvania's not a right-to-work state. You know, Caterpillar just moved to, announced the construction of a plant in Georgia. Cartex moving a plant to Alabama. It's because they're right-to-work states. And Dave has yet to support that legislation.
Dave?
Brian has simple solutions to some pretty complicated problems. I'm here to tell you that yes, we should look at right to work. Yes, we should look at changing the pension system, but that doesn't solve everything. Pension has been the issue he's been using. I mean, he was the first candidate in the state of Pennsylvania this year to run negative television ads. He's run them through his personal fortune, he's run them through his campaign committee, and in a clear violation of state law, he even ran them through one of his own corporations. The Attorney General, the district attorneys have been notified of that violation. You can go to jail for breaking that law. And so this overabundance of attention on one simple issue as the solution to all of our problems, I'm here to tell you, it's just not true.
Let's stay, I want to ask, that brings me to, we're talking about those negative ads, okay? Brian, there have been a number of negative ads that he's saying you started, okay? Some of them state here that about the stimulus money, some have state about RICO, that you're polluting the air, and that your company is not following the regulations, etc. So these are heavy charges. They show FBI guys knocking down your door on his ad. How do you respond to that?
Well, I asked Dave where the FBI ad came from when we walked in. He said his media guy came up with it. But you know, I don't want to just be distracted by he's trying to distract you, the voter, with these allegations. I mean, you know, he might as well accuse me of being the Grinch that stole Christmas. I mean, it's one silly allegation after the other. I mean, we've sued him because of his false claims about us taking stimulus money. I mean, we filed a lawsuit that Dave will, you know, the consequences of that will be what they are. So I don't think that the voter needs to be distracted by that, and that's been his attempt. I don't think I've ever run a negative ad. I think that the ads that I've run have spoken to Dave's record or lack of record, and just simply trying to educate the voter in terms of what the reality of Dave's voting record is. I mean, he voted for a 25% increase in a pension for state workers and a 50% increase in his own pension. 34% raise in his midnight pay. Were those, by the way, Dave says things aren't easy. I don't understand. I wonder how easy it was to vote for those particular pieces of legislation. But, so he's certainly trying to distract you, the voter, from the reality. The reality of it is, Sam, I mean, we have 620 great employees. When I started my career, Schuylkill County in the 29th district imported 100% of its electricity. Today, the single largest export from our community is energy. Dave's attacked that. He's decided to attack me in that regard. The violations, you know, that the DEP has leveled against us over a 25-year period in business, in the coal business, in the energy business, is maybe it's accurate, but those kind of violations are mud on the road or situations like that. So I don't make light of them, but the regulatory burden that we have in Pennsylvania is why I'm here. We need to fix, we need to have a friendlier Pennsylvania. We need to have a friend in Pennsylvania.
Dave, you want to respond to that?
I think it just heard a description of breathtaking hypocrisy. He has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars from his own fortune, from his campaign committee, and we believe illegally from Waste Management and Processors, Inc. The law is very clear. Corporations may not spend money to defeat a senator, to elect a senator, to defeat a governor, to elect a governor, and yet that is exactly what his company did. That's why the district attorneys are looking at this race. That's why the Attorney General is looking at this race. The law is very clear. You may not do it, and he did. He was the first candidate in the state of Pennsylvania this year to go negative on the television. in 25 different Senate districts, in 203 House districts. He was the first one to go negative. I don't think that's a record that anybody should be proud of. Today, 3 negative mail pieces hit my house. He's spending an atrocious amount of money, and I believe I've said it very clear. This Senate seat, it should not be for sale to the highest bidder.
Brian?
Well, it's pretty ironic that we hear that, but from Dave, because he's being funded by the special interest groups. The Pennsylvania Senate PAC is Dave's funding source, and Dave's been funded by that special interest group through this whole election process because they don't want to address the pensionism issue. He doesn't want to address this particular issue, and neither do the rest of the senators, because I've attacked their legislative fortunes. So Dave can make these allegations as it relates to the DAs. The reality of that is that he made an allegation that was simply false. He tried to hurt our shareholders and employees, and the company felt compelled to respond. I think as anyone else would be compelled to respond when your company's attacked with allegations. Those allegations were attacking the shareholders and investors in that particular company. It's okay he attacks me. I mean, like I said, he can claim that I'm the Grinch that stole Christmas, but that's simply not true.
Folks, you're watching the Sam Lesante Show. We have Senator Dave Argle and Brian Rich. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. My guests, Senator Dave Argle and Brian Rich. Brian, was brought up before about, full-time legislator, okay, which Senator Argle said he is. You're involved in a lot of businesses. Will you be a full-time legislator? And how will you, as being a full-time legislator, look for accountability in the state of Pennsylvania?
Well, Sam, I think that certainly I'll be a full-time legislator. I mean, this is a very important job, and it has great consequences, it has great opportunity, and that's why I've decided to run. I mean, this is about public service. I'd like to be a public servant. I'd like to, I didn't serve in the military, and this is my opportunity to serve. That's one of my big regrets in my life, but we need to make changes. We need to make fundamental changes, and we need bold leadership, and I think I'm prepared. I know I'm prepared to do that. We can't sit here and idly allow what's happening to continue. Fiscal reform is a must. If we ever expect to get Pennsylvania back where it belongs, we need to create jobs. The jobs are a solution to many, many things. It's a solution to welfare reform. The best solution for welfare is a job. Of course, new jobs create revenue for the Treasury. So it's about jobs. It's about fixing our fiscal house and creating opportunity for new corporations to come to Pennsylvania, so that we have a growth in our population, so that our housing markets recover. And that turns on regulatory reform. I mean, career politicians aren't prepared to deal with the regulations that they themselves wrote. So we need to get a systemic change in Harrisburg. We need businessmen and career politicians out of there, so that we can drive common sense back into the legislature and into the system.
Dave, because you're an incumbent, I need to ask you this question. It's been on the minds of many people about access cards and abuse of fraud in the welfare system. What have you done as a state senator to help prevent a lot of this fraud?
Sam, many of the reforms that my opponent has suggested, I've already worked on. I've worked on a bipartisan commission with 6 people from the private sector that found over $400 million in possible savings. I've worked with the Department of Public Welfare for the very first time when a former drug felon comes to the Department of Public Welfare and asks for a welfare check. They're now subject to drug tests, random drug tests. It was the first time it was ever done in Pennsylvania. Schuylkill County has led the way in terms of, we had CNN here just a couple of weeks ago to learn more about it. That was a bill that I've strongly advocated, and we're now looking to see how we can broaden it. We have to squeeze the Department of Public Welfare. There's no one that ever comes to any of my town hall meetings that says, well, hurt the disabled, hurt those people that have mental issues and need genuine help. Nobody ever says that. What drives the people that I represent crazy is when someone, perhaps with a drug issue, sits home and uses public dollars to feed their own drug habit. And so, yes, I've come out again and again in favor of squeezing out the waste, the fraud, and the abuse from the Department of Public Welfare. I've also sponsored legislation that said that the system should be there for American citizens who genuinely need it, but it ought not to be there for illegal immigrants.
Okay, we're going to have, do you have 30 seconds to respond? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. It's, the state budget today is $29 billion. When Dave entered the House 27 years ago, the state budget was $9 billion. At that time, the Welfare Department's budget was less than $2 billion. Today, the Welfare Department's budget's over $9 billion, fully 1/3 of our state budget. It's about jobs. And Pennsylvania's state government grew 300%. Pennsylvania GDP over that same period only grew 30%. We need to create jobs. That's the core principles that I'm going to live by, and that's the solution to many of these problems.
Dave, I'll give you 30 seconds.
If you look at when most of that growth occurred, it wasn't because of Dave Argle. It was because of a guy by the name of Ed Rendell. I didn't help Ed Rendell get elected. My opponent did. I think if you look at those 8 years, that's when the system went completely haywire.
Okay.
Did you vote for his budgets?
Some I did, some I didn't. One time I kept him 9 months. He blackmailed every single school district in the state until we finally negotiated a compromise.
How many
if
budgets?
you wouldn't have helped him get elected, he could have never blackmailed us.
Okay.
85% of his budgets, Dave, you voted for.
We have 1 minute. We're going to have to do some 1 minute summation right now. I want to try to keep this as balanced as I possibly could. So, Brian, I'm going to ask you for 1 minute to tell the public, once again, why they should vote for you and why you should be the next senator in the 29th senatorial district.
Well, thanks, Sam. Thanks, Dave. I started by saying that when I was a kid, I loved the Apollo program, the Mercury program, and was inspired by that. Our kids aren't inspired by much today, unfortunately. It's a different environment, and we need to restore that kind of hope. We need to restore that kind of can-do attitude. State government has created such obstacles that I'd like to share a little, if I can. I met a boy that started a lawn mowing company, and he was cutting grass, and he had a successful little business going, and his dad said, well, you better go down the street and get liability insurance. And he went down the street to the local insurance agent, and the agent told him that he was in fact in violation of the law because he wasn't providing workman's comp for his couple of high school buddies, and he didn't have the proper IDs to run a business. So that's it's destroying kids' hopes, and I think that we need to fix regulation in Pennsylvania to restore that kind of hope that we had as kids.
Thanks. Senator, you have 1 minute to conclude.
Brian has defended again and again and again his corporate dollars from Waste Management Processors, Inc. You've heard me say again and again that I believe that that is a violation of the election code. Where have I been getting my support? From groups like the NRA, the pro-life groups, the State Troopers Association, the nurses, the corrections officers, yes, the taxpayers associations of Pennsylvania, and this one that just came in today, the National Federation of Independent Business is now supporting me because of my willingness to protect free enterprise, create an environment in Pennsylvania where small businesses can grow and thrive based on my rock-solid record of support of small businesses. I know that's not the kind of record that Brian's been describing, but this isn't something that I made up. This is something that came to me because of my voting record from then NFIB. The State Chamber of Commerce has said something very similar. It's been an honor for me to serve as the state senator for the last 3 years, and I'm certainly asking the voters of this district to renew my contract.
Well, I want to thank you, Senator, and I want to thank you, Brian, for coming on the show. I know there's a lot to be said, folks, and I said before in the beginning, there's a lot of information that you should need to know. about each candidate, particularly if there's a charge made either by the senator or the charge made by Brian. Get the true facts, because sometimes we only look at headlines and we don't know the full stories behind everything. And once you begin to do that, you begin to get a better feel of who the person should be to be your next senator. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.